So let's get going here. Why don't you give everybody like your hockey story and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I like how
Yeah.
far back do you want to go?
Well,
Like,
however much you want to go, this is a hockey podcast. So like talk about kind of like the hockey you played growing up and how you ended up playing Acha, where you're at now.
okay, yeah, sure. Okay, let's see. Well, I started playing hockey at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The only Army base I know of, like outside of any of the service academies that has an ice rink on base. Um, And yeah, I'd done a couple of other like activities up to that point. I was 6 years old, and they were. I think the base was doing some kind of like, "Hey, come try hockey out. Like, we'll give you most of the equipment, like super cheap." Um, and my mom had competed nationally as a figure skater, when she was growing up, and my dad and his side of the family is from like Minnesota, North Dakota. So even though he didn't really play organized hockey, like it seemed like a no brainer to them. Like, well, he already knows how to skate. Like, let's see if he likes hockey, and so that's where it all started. Played up until I think like my first year of squirts there, and then we moved to Munich, Germany. Um, I had to jump through a few hoops to get me like a they're called Spielerpass, but so that I could like actually play in games over there. And so we lived there for about 3 years. I played 3 years on a German ice hockey team, which was honestly a blast. We travel around all over Germany. We went to Switzerland a couple times. We even hosted a 7 nation tournament a couple years in a row, um, which is really funny because we got a team from Scotland to show up, and it was hilarious playing them. They thought we were all like German kids, and so like I lined up at one of the face-offs and started like speaking perfect English, and one of the guys' jaw like dropped. Um, and then right before I left, we actually got invited to travel to Scotland to play in like a tournament that they were hosting with a bunch of like local Scottish teams. So that was pretty cool. Um, and let's see, that was I think going into my second year. So the summer going into my second year of Pee Wees, we moved back to the States, to Leavenworth, Kansas, which is just outside of Kansas City. And I started playing with the Kansas City Outlaws. I played Pee Wees, started playing high school hockey there too. And then at a certain point, I caught the attention of a guy who was a GM for a summer AAA team in Minnesota, Minnesota Junior Mavericks. They played uh, out of Albert Lee, Minnesota over the summers. Um, and so he kind of got me looped in with them. I tried out, I made the team. So I was playing AAA over the summers, like my first couple years at Bantam. Um, and then from during one of those like summer tournaments, um, I caught the attention of the Omaha AAA coaching staff. They had started up a pretty successful U18 AAA team, and they were looking to add a U16 team. And this was like 2010, I think. I was getting ready to go into my junior year of high school, um, and so they asked me to come to tryouts. I tried out. I made that team, and so I played U16 AAA for Omaha AAA my junior year, and then my senior year I bumped up and played U18. I had a little bit of like, tier three juniors and some like Canadian like junior B teams kind of like trying like reaching out for like tryout camps and stuff this summer after my senior year, but I'd already um gone through the whole process. Like I knew I was getting in to West Point. That's where I'd wanted to go since I was a little kid. And once I, kind of started making the jumps that I did in hockey, I was like, man, it would be cool to play there. But once I knew I was getting in, I'm like, I'll figure it out. um, and so like right before I showed up at West Point, we'd been to the rink a handful of times previously because my dad was a West Point graduate. So we were up there when I was growing up for reunions and stuff. But we just went in, and I was walking by the coach's office, and um, had an opportunity to talk with a couple of the coaches there, and told them my story, what level of hockey I played at, that I would love to wear an Army jersey. And they told me to not bother bringing my gear, but they wanted to have me as somebody kind of helping out the team, just because I could relate to all the guys that they had, all the incoming guys that they had. I actually ended up in the same company. That first summer you show up is like a basic training, and they sprinkle out all of the like D1 uh, sports teams. So like all the football players together, all the baseball players, lacrosse, hockey, like women's soccer, basketball, you name it. And so I just happened to be in the men's hockey group. And so like just chatting with them that first summer, like we played against some of the same guys. Like, you know, the hockey world is a small world. I'm sure I don't have to, tell you or anybody listening that, it's crazy. Like the people that you can run into or, cross paths with. Um, so I didn't really like that answer, just because, being a competitive person and a competitive athlete, I'm like, I would love to be around the hockey team. They're a great bunch of guys, but I'm like, I want to try and like compete in something while I'm here. Like I'd done a couple years of track and did reasonably well, like as a, short mid distance sprinter. So I was like, okay, well, the hockey team doesn't want me, let me see if I can make the track team, because, my times are pretty good. So um, I did that. And my high school coaches hadn't updated like the last races of the season. So, when I was talking to the track coaches, they're like, yeah, we can't really find your times. And, I was able to like come out for tryouts, but I think it was kind of clear that, they're kind of give me the thanks, but no thanks. Um, at which point I was kind of like, okay, well, you know, every cadet, like if you don't play, a D1 sport, if you don't play like a competitive club sport, you have to do what's called company athletics, since you just compete against other, like your company forms teams for like flag football, basketball, like floor hockey, depending on the time of year. So
Intramurals.
yeah, exactly. And so I was kind of mentally getting ready, like, okay, well, I guess that's what I'm gonna do, and just be the best, company athlete I can be. Um, and then classes, the first week of classes started, and I remember it just vividly, because it's just one of those things. It's like something was meant to be, because I show up to, it's like the second day of classes, so I show up. It's a chemistry class, and we go around the room, introduce ourselves, name, company, you know where you're from, interesting fact about you, that kind of thing. And we're going around the room, and a guy stands up, and he kind of stood out because he was the only sophomore in the class. For I don't even remember the reason why, but he was the only sophomore. All the rest of us are freshmen, and he's like, "Hey, my name's Nick Pappas. I'm a sophomore, obviously. Um, I play on the club hockey team here," and I forget like what else he said, but as soon as I heard the words club hockey, I'm like, what? I need to talk to that guy after class. So like, thankfully it was day one, so we were just kind of going over like the syllabus and like super basic stuff, because I wasn't paying attention to any of that. Like the only thought in my head was like, I need to talk to that guy after class. So the bell rings, we're packing up our stuff, and I like pack everything up. I rush right over. I'm like, "Hey man, like I heard you say you're on the club hockey team. Like I just came from playing U18 AAA, in Omaha. I'd love to, get some more information. Like, how can I like, or other tryouts, like whatever." And he was like, his face kind of like lit up. He was like, "Dude, holy shit. Like, yeah, let me get your information. Like, we'll add you to the email distro list. We've got tryouts like coming up like later that week, and like the following week." And he was like, "It's like, this is crazy." Like, um,
Yeah, like so welcoming versus everything else you'd met trying to play hockey or interested in hockey, for it to come out of like left field and be so welcoming.
oh, I know. Well, and I don't. I have a little like bad taste in my mouth about my like the D1 hockey team a little bit, but I understand where they're coming from. They had expectations of like they wanted guys that had a year or two of juniors experience, and I knew that going in. So I can't really be upset about that. It's I was a solid player, and I knew my role, and I felt like that could bring something to their team. But I mean, at the end of the day, I wasn't a standout at U18 AAA where it's like I could be like, "Well, hey, I'm like so and so. Like
A
you've
walk
probably heard
on.
of me."
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like I wasn't there. So I think it all kind of worked out for a reason, because I ended up making the team. And it was actually, what I didn't realize at the time is, up until that point, it had been an inline hockey club team, and had done like really well, like going to regionals, going to nationals, like year in, year out. But all the guys on the team were former ice hockey players. Like the guy that ended up being kind of like our player coach had played like a year or so at St. John's in Minnesota, like before coming to West Point. Like the guy that Nick Pappas that I met on day one had played like tier three juniors. Like there was a lot of like really good ice hockey experience on that team, and so they, I guess, had come across the ACHA. And so my freshman year, that season, was our inaugural year at ACHA D2. Our I forget what they call our probationary year. Um, so I mean, just even the timing of that, I'm like, how crazy that like my freshman year is the first year they stand up the club ice hockey team. So we didn't play a whole lot of games that first year, but I mean it was a whole lot of fun. We got to play Navy's Division 1 ACHA team, which again, because my dad is a grad, I grew up on the whole Army Navy rivalry. So to be able to say that I played in the first ever Army Navy hockey game is like that alone. I would, you know, playing NCAA D1 hockey would have been real cool. But I'm like, being a part of the Army Navy history, I'm like that's worth it for me.
Is did you play at Army or at Naval Academy for that game?
So for that first one, we played at the Naval Academy, and it
Okay.
was it was nuts. They had, their capacity is like 2,000 maybe, and they had the bleachers packed. They had like literally all standing room that you could like around the rink was just packed, and like people behind like trying to see over like people along the glass. Like it was nuts.
Joe, I have the funniest story for you. So I also played at the Naval against Navy at the Naval Academy,
Oh,
and
no way.
so we took a road trip. I played Canisius D1 ACHA.
Okay.
So during a road trip, we took a swing down there, and one of our freshman goalies, that was a backup, got an unfortunate turn of events that was his first game ever getting a start, I think. And no joke, Joe, they had an inflatable orca whale behind the net, and somebody was riding it. Somebody was riding an inflatable behind the net behind him, and he was so rattled. It was me and my buddy Puma always talk about the moment where we like look from the bench and
And just see that.
there's like a college age girl on an orca whale and they're like passing her behind the net. We're like, oh my god, don't let them get the roster because if they find out Dylan's name, he's screwed. He's
Oh,
toast.
yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
cool. So you were part of the first Army Navy game. That's pretty cool. What are the
Yeah.
odds?
What are the odds? Well, and I mean, it was impressive too. I mean, we lost, but it was 6-4, which I don't think they were expecting at all. And I mean, we had run into the same thing all week, like all season long, is we would show up and teams would be like, "Oh, well, this like they used to be an inline hockey team. Like these guys can't be good." And I mean, we only lost a handful of games that year, and they were to like legit good teams or that like D1 ACHE teams. So, um, yeah, we had a lot of talent. So we were like, okay, yeah, sure, underestimate us, see what happens.
So
Um,
how did that season end, and what became of that, and where'd you end up going?
so I mean, we that season, I forget what our record was, but I want to say it was at least like 15 wins, something like that. Um, like five or so losses, maybe. Um, because it was our probationary year. We weren't part of any conference or anything. Like we didn't have any playoffs, so it was just kind of our season was over. Is over. We had like a year end barbecue. Sent the seniors off. Um, but then like kind of going into my sophomore year is when things started to really kind of come together a little bit. One of my classmates and D partner, um, he was from New Jersey, and he had a coach from high school that had like stopped coaching. Was just kind of working whatever his 9 to 5 job was, and so his family like invited um, the guy to like come up to an Army football game, and so we were all it was me, my D partner Morsh, and our goalie. He was also in the same class as us, Nico, and we were just kind of telling him about the team, the success that we had had. the year prior, the time commitment that we were putting in and everything. And so um, I forget if it was that year or it wasn't until our junior year, but he actually ended up becoming our head coach and giving us a little bit more legitimacy of having a head coach with actual hockey experience because up to that point we've been relying on our player coach and we had some officers and NCOs who like work at the academy that it was kind of like a volunteer thing for them to sort of like be our like mentor and like take us on
Yeah,
these road trips and
sponsor
stuff.
like just
Yeah.
like if you went to a school, how they make like teachers and stuff, or some
Exactly.
people interact with it, so it's not just like old school fraternity.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and I mean, those guys were awesome. They were super passionate about hockey, super passionate about like our team, um, but really no like formal like hockey knowledge or experience. Um, but we had I think a little bit more of a like set schedule. We uh, we got in touch with Dangle Sauce and got like some actual like nice, good, like real clean looking, uh, you know, uniforms. I think by the end of that year, we ended up, getting enough attention or whatever that we got, a spot in a conference going into my junior year. So I mean, each year we just kind of built upon like the legitimacy of the program, not just from like an ACHA perspective, like, we're a good team and, we played a lot of really good teams up in the Northeast, but even um, the school itself started to take us a little bit more seriously each year. We were playing Navy and, I forget what year our new like superintendent came in. And at that point, Army football had been on like a 14-15 year losing streak to Navy. So one of his priorities was, especially football, but every single sport was winning and not just winning, but beating Navy. And so when, you know, the school kind of got wind of, well, we have a competitive club hockey team that plays Navy, like the superintendent, the commandant started like showing up at Army Navy games and like it became a big deal. Um, and uh, I, again, the years blur a little bit. I'd have to kind of like do a little bit of digging on the exact order, but I think we played the D1 Navy team another time, and I think it wasn't 6-4, it wasn't a complete blowout. It might have been like 6-3, 7-3, Um, but then they started having us play against their D2 team. Um, and the first time we played their D2 team, we won 8-2.
Yeah.
So very quickly they
Felt good.
started matching us up with their D1 team again.
You're right. Felt good though.
Um, yeah, no, it was awesome, and that game actually, the Reading Royals of the ECHL,
Uh-huh.
they were the ones that kind of put it all together, and they made it. I can find the puck here actually.
That's so cool.
Yeah, they called it the Royal Reading Royal Cup.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. So like they had both teams come down. Like in the morning, they had like, I think both teams just sent, like some of the freshmen, the healthy scratches, um, to act as like assistant coaches for like a little youth clinic. Um, and they had the, I forget if it was the Army Navy game first, and then, yeah, I think it was our game first. It kind of like 4 or 5 o'clock, maybe like puck drop. Um, and then later on was, the Reading Royals game. And, we got seats, we got to walk around the rink a little bit. They had like team dinners for all of us and like brought in some like local veterans from like the Foreign Legion or American Legion. Yeah, so it was, I don't know, it was a real done event, obviously, with uh, a pro team putting it together, but it was a lot of fun. Um, and yeah, I mean, we just kept building, and then it really, I think the next kind of standout moment for me is my senior year. Um, we got plugged in with Mark Messier at the time had been working with a group doing this rivalry on ice series, which for a number of years had been like Harvard versus Yale, Harvard versus Quinnipiac, NCAA D1 as like the college game, and then like immediately following that, or flip the order, um, was like a Rangers Islanders game. So people that bought tickets for the Rangers game could watch both games.
And be introduced
Um,
to hockey at a different
College
level they might
hockey,
not see.
exactly, and then giving the college players like, hey, you get to play at Madison Square Garden in front of however many thousand
Right.
people decide to stick around. So my senior year, we got um, plugged into that. So it was the Rangers Islanders. I think it was Harvard Quinnipiac that year, which was kind of cool because a guy that I had played with on the Minnesota Junior Mavericks, and then I ended up in Omaha. He went to play for Russell Stover's AAA program. He ended up playing at Harvard, so he was playing in the Harvard Quinnipiac game, and then they had the Army Navy game. It was like a 11 o'clock midnight puck drop for our game. So I mean, the stands were getting kind of empty by that point, but I mean, still, like they had the jumbotron going. Like it was still an unreal experience. Like Mark Messier came into our locker room before the game, like shook hands with everybody, like talked to us a little bit. Um, and so we ended up losing that game like 6-4, I think. But I scored. And so that's, again, one of those core memories of like I scored a goal in Madison Square Garden. How many people, aside from, pro hockey players, say that? Um, and then a couple weeks later, we played Navy again back down in Annapolis, and it was their senior night. And we beat them in front of a packed home crowd. And so that was like the first Army win over Navy's D1 team. And actually, that was the only one since this last season. The boys finally pulled it off again for a second time.
That's so cool.
So,
You scored a
yeah,
goal at Madison Square Garden. That might be the coolest thing ever. That has to be a resume line.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I always, when it's right, there's a good opportunity to bring it up. That's it's a cool story to have in my back pocket. That's for sure. Um,
I love it.
so yeah, so that was that kind of wrapped up ACHA career at West Point. And I graduated. Was an Army officer for a couple of years. I was medically discharged for my hearing. And after that, I moved up to Fort Collins, Colorado. And, I everywhere I went, after I graduated, I found an adult league to play in. And so I did the same thing, when I moved to Fort Collins. But that summer, the Colorado Avalanche were having their rookie development camp, and usually they do everything down in Denver. But that particular summer, they had like one of the days, they had the guys practice and do like a 3-on-3 scrimmage at one of the rinks up here in Fort Collins. And I told my wife, I was like, hey, like, I really want to go check it out. And I did. And, it was just something about being in a rink with like the competitive atmosphere again, guys walking around in track suits with, the Avs logo on it, guys in polos, clipboards, and all that stuff. I was like, I don't know. It just kind of gave me like goosebumps. Like, wow, I miss this. And so that led me to do a little digging through a series of connections. I ended up becoming an assistant coach for Colorado State's ACHA Division II team, just kind of as a volunteer. And so I did that for a couple seasons, and then decided that I wanted to go back to school and get my MBA. And because ACHA rules are, and especially at the D2 level, are a little bit more flexible, I was able to to play again, which was really cool. Played a couple games at the tail end of the 21-22 season. Once I got enrolled, got knee to knee in the last game of the season, so I thought it was done. And
Oh
then
no.
the fall of last year, tryouts rolled around, and again, I didn't show up. I wasn't planning on skating. I had told the guy that was our head coach, I was like, I think I'm done playing, done coaching. Like, I just go off into the beer leagues for real this time. But tryouts rolled around, and between the men's D1 and D2 teams, only 3 goalies showed up for tryouts. So I saw a post that both teams had made. It was like, if you're a goalie and play hockey and you go to CSU, like, please come to tryouts. And so I texted the D2 coach. I was like, are you seriously only 3 goalies at tryouts? And he was like, yeah, man, it's bad. And so I had another conversation with my wife of like, because I mean, by that point, my knee had healed up enough. I was skating here and there, playing like pickup games on the weekends and stuff. But I was like, how do you feel about me being a backup goalie? I take shots in practice once, twice a week. Warm ups on games on the weekends, but other than that, unless something happens, I'm sitting on the bench, and if I do go in, I'm wearing all the pads and nobody can touch me. And so I ended up being CSU D2 backup goalie all this last year, and it was a good time. But yeah, now I'm officially done. Hopefully they can find somebody for next year. I know they have a couple guys that were trying to get enrolled, this upcoming fall, so they should be in good shape. But I don't know. it was a blast. Just kind of another story to have, which
Right. No, that's really cool too, especially you
uh,
got an opportunity to play and how it kind of followed you along. Like it seems like you almost couldn't not play.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the whole time I was an assistant coach, I was like, man, the whole time it was, trying to do a good job of like keeping myself in shape because I'm like, man, if I ever end up getting an MBA or something or going back to school, which, I feel like I'll probably do here at some point, like it'd be so cool to like be able to play.
Right.
So,
Well, real briefly, tell me about your page and your mission now.
yeah. So, right now, it's kind of a side hustle right now. It's called Ruck On. Um, it's kind of centered around like rucking in the military, but that was sort of the main way I stayed in shape once I got out of the army, and so I kind of credit that as like what helped keep me in shape enough to come out of retirement after 5 years not playing like competitive hockey, and step back out on the ice and actually be able to play. And so, um, really, the main goal is to help other people, stay in shape, just be more resilient, like physically, mentally. Rucking can be a very like low cost way to exercise. I have stuff from the army that I use, and once I could afford it, I bought some nice equipment and a real nice rucksack and stuff. But I mean, really, you could buy a JanSport bag that'll hold 20 to 30 pounds. You can make your own sandbags for $5, with some duct tape, some sand, and gallon Ziploc bags, and you can walk with it. That's a good workout. You can do just about anything you could do with a kettlebell or a dumbbell with a rucksack. So, um, and I have some like virtual rucking challenges, and it's all part of it is to try and help some you know veteran nonprofits that I've become connected with, and they have kind of supported me along the way, and so I see it as a way to give back to them, having a portion of like profits and stuff go back to them. um but yeah, and I'm right now trying to figure out good ways to kind of tie it into the hockey as well. I think it's a a unique training tool that hockey players can use, because I think most hockey players, if they think of a recovery day, they're like, okay, well, I'll just go for a walk, do some mobility and stretching and stuff, and you could add a ruck to it, you know for a walk, and have it be low impact, and you're not really, you can scale it, so you're not taxing yourself too much, but you're still kind of giving your body a little extra resistance, and um, yeah, so that's Ruck On in a nutshell.
I love it. What are your social media handles so we can find you and follow you and support you?
Yeah, so it's Ruck On Ventures, with underscores in between, on Instagram and TikTok. That's kind of where I'm most active. Ruck on Facebook, um, and then Ruck On 2019 at Gmail, for email.
And what's like the best way to support you? Want people to go and give you a follow? Do you have any ways for us to support you? Because I love what you're doing.
Yeah, follows good. I guess if you're interested in, like ruck training, or, if that kind of something you're into, shoot me a DM. I'm working on, some paid training programs, but I got a lot of free stuff that I can share with anyone that reaches out. Um, yeah,
Awesome. Well, thanks for chatting with us. I really enjoyed chatting with you. Not only is it like inspiring, but I think it's cool to see like how like hockey's followed you around and like you obviously have a passion for the game. So I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, man.
yeah, of course. Thanks, Corey.